Have you ever wondered how one moment of heartbreak can change your life forever? Sometimes, when everything falls apart, it's the universe's way of making room for something even greater. Today, we're delving into the story of a man who had it all: money, success, and a seemingly perfect life. But when his wife left him, he discovered something far more valuable: a chance at true happiness and love. David's story isn't just about loss, it's about rediscovery. It's a reminder that life's greatest challenges often lead to our most profound transformations. Whether you've faced heartbreak or moments of self-doubt, this story will resonate with the universal human experience of seeking love and purpose. Let's begin. David was the embodiment of the American dream. Born into a modest family, he worked tirelessly to rise above his circumstances. By the time he turned 35, he was a millionaire with a thriving tech company, a sprawling mansion, and Emma, the love of his life and his college sweetheart, by his side. From the outside, their life seemed perfect: lavish vacations, gala events, and a home that could grace the pages of a luxury magazine. But behind closed doors, things weren't as idyllic as they appeared. Emma often felt like an afterthought in David's life. His relentless drive for success consumed him, leaving little time for their relationship. She tried to communicate her feelings, but David was always too busy. "Just a little longer," he'd say. "Once I land this deal, we'll have time for us." But that time never came. One fateful evening, David came home to an empty house. Emma's closet was bare, and a note lay on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself. I hope one day you'll understand." David was devastated. He spent days in denial, rereading her note, trying to pinpoint the moment their love had unraveled. It wasn't just the loss of Emma that hurt. It was the realization that he had sacrificed his happiness and his marriage on the altar of ambition. For the first time in years, David was alone, forced to confront the emptiness in his life. Devastation consumed David in the weeks following Emma's departure. His once bustling mansion felt eerily quiet, a constant reminder of what he had lost. Determined to numb the pain, he buried himself in work, but even that failed to bring solace. His empire, the source of so much pride, now felt hollow. Eventually, David reached his breaking point. One sleepless night, staring at the ceiling, he realized he couldn't keep living this way. He needed help. Reluctantly, he booked his first therapy session, a decision that would prove life-changing. In therapy, David began unpacking the layers of his pain. His therapist challenged him to confront uncomfortable truths: his workaholic tendencies, his fear of vulnerability, and the ways he had prioritized success over relationships. It wasn't easy. Each session felt like peeling back a new layer of himself, and what lay beneath wasn't always pleasant. Determined to heal, David sought out other resources. He joined a support group for men navigating divorce, where he met others with similar struggles. Hearing their stories gave him a sense of camaraderie and hope. To distance himself from his past life, David moved out of his mansion and into a modest apartment downtown. The sleek modernity of his old home was replaced by a cozy, lived-in space with mismatched furniture and an old coffee maker that sputtered more than it brewed. Surprisingly, the simplicity brought a strange sense of comfort. But the journey was far from smooth. One afternoon, while clearing out old boxes, David stumbled upon a scrapbook Emma had made during their first year of marriage. Seeing their happy memories brought an avalanche of emotions: regret, sorrow, and a longing for the simpler times they had shared. In moments like these, David felt like giving up. But he remembered something his therapist had told him: healing isn't about forgetting. It's about finding a way to move forward. Slowly, he began to embrace the pain as part of his journey. One day, while scrolling through community events online, David stumbled upon an opportunity to volunteer at a local shelter. It wasn't something he'd ever considered before, but something about it called to him. Hesitant yet curious, he signed up. At the shelter, David's world began to expand. He met people from all walks of life, each with their own stories of struggle and resilience. For the first time in years, David felt connected to something bigger than himself. David's first day at the shelter was humbling. He spent hours handing out meals, listening to the stories of those he served. It was a stark contrast to his previous life, where conversations revolved around quarterly profits and market trends. Here, the focus was on survival, community, and hope. Among the volunteers was Claire, a spirited woman with a kind heart and an infectious laugh. She wasn't someone David would have noticed in his old life. Her clothes were simple, and she had a quiet, grounded presence that drew people to her effortlessly. David and Claire started working together during shifts, stacking supplies and organizing donation drives. At first, their conversations were casual, revolving around their shared commitment to the shelter. But over time, they began to open up about their lives. Claire spoke of her journey leaving a high-stress corporate job to pursue a more meaningful life, and David, in turn, shared pieces of his story, his rise to success, his marriage, and the painful aftermath of Emma leaving. One evening, after the shelter closed, David and Claire sat on the steps, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. The city lights twinkled around them, and for the first time in a long while, David felt at ease. "You know," Claire said, breaking the silence, "sometimes losing everything is the best way to find yourself." Her words hit David like a bolt of lightning. For months, he had been mourning his losses, clinging to what he had built. But Claire's perspective made him wonder if Emma's departure had been less of an ending and more of a beginning. As the weeks went by, David found himself looking forward to his shifts at the shelter, not just for the work, but for the time he spent with Claire. She had a way of challenging him to see the world differently. When he expressed guilt over his past, she encouraged him to focus on who he was becoming. One rainy evening, while helping Claire carry boxes to her car, David finally found the courage to ask her out. "Dinner? Just the two of us?" he asked, his voice tinged with both hope and hesitation. Claire hesitated for a moment before smiling. "I'd like that." Their first date was far from the lavish affairs David was used to. They ate at a small, family-owned Italian restaurant, sharing stories and laughter over candlelight. For the first time, David didn't feel the need to impress. He could just be himself, and that was enough. Over time, their bond deepened. Claire's values, compassion, simplicity, and authenticity began to influence David in profound ways. She helped him see that success wasn't about wealth or status. It was about connection, purpose, and living a life aligned with your values. But just as David began to imagine a future with Claire, doubts crept in. He worried about his past, the man he had been, and whether he deserved this new chapter. Could someone like Claire truly accept him, flaws and all? One night, as they walked along the waterfront, David voiced his fears. "What if I'm not enough? What if my past catches up with me?" Claire stopped and turned to face him. "David, none of us are perfect. It's not about where you've been. It's about where you're going. And from where I stand, you're on the right path." Her words gave David the reassurance he needed. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because he was learning to embrace the imperfections. David's relationship with Claire blossomed into something he hadn't experienced before: authentic, unguarded love. Yet, the road to building a new life wasn't without obstacles. Determined to align his actions with his newfound values, David took bold steps. He stepped down as CEO of his company, handing over the reins to a trusted partner. Instead, he shifted his focus to launching a nonprofit aimed at mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the importance of balance and purpose alongside business success. This decision wasn't met without resistance. Colleagues and peers questioned his motives. "Are you really going to give up everything you've built?" one associate asked incredulously. David's response was firm yet calm. "I'm not giving it up. I'm redirecting it. Success is meaningless if it comes at the cost of your soul." Meanwhile, his relationship with Claire grew stronger. Together, they started volunteering at multiple organizations, combining their skills and passion to make a difference. Claire often pushed David out of his comfort zone, encouraging him to try things he never would have considered before, like leading mindfulness workshops or sharing his story at community events. But as David embraced this new chapter, the shadows of his past occasionally loomed large. He received a message from Emma one evening, a brief email asking how he was doing. Though the exchange was cordial, it stirred a mix of emotions: gratitude for what they once had, and relief that he was no longer bound by the person he used to be. Confiding in Claire, David admitted his lingering guilt over how his marriage had ended. "I feel like I failed her," he said. Claire placed a reassuring hand on his. "You didn't fail, David. You both grew in different directions. The fact that you're growing now, that's what matters." This perspective became a turning point for David. Rather than viewing his past as a series of mistakes, he began to see it as a collection of lessons that had brought him to this moment. As David's confidence grew, he faced another challenge, striking a balance between his professional ambitions and his personal life. His nonprofit gained traction quickly, demanding long hours and constant travel. Recognizing the patterns that had led to his previous burnout, David made a conscious effort to prioritize quality time with Claire. One evening, as they cooked dinner together in Claire's tiny kitchen, she teased him about his newfound culinary skills. "Who knew the millionaire could chop onions without crying?" she joked. David laughed, realizing how far he had come. This was the life he had always longed for. Simple, meaningful, and shared with someone who truly saw him. But their journey wasn't without tests. Claire was hesitant about taking their relationship to the next level, worried that David might revert to his old habits. "How do I know you won't lose yourself in work again?" she asked during a serious conversation. David didn't shy away from her concerns. Instead, he responded with transparency and humility. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, Claire, but I can promise that I'll always choose us. You've shown me what matters, and I won't let that go." His words, and the consistent actions that followed, proved his commitment. Slowly, Claire's doubts faded, replaced by trust in the man David was becoming. As the months turned into years, David and Claire built a life centered on shared values. Their home became a haven of love and laughter, filled with mismatched furniture, hand-picked books, and the aroma of Claire's favorite lavender candles. David's nonprofit thrived, but he never let it overshadow his personal life. Together, they traveled, explored new hobbies, and hosted intimate dinners with friends. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was more than enough. Years later, David stood in front of a packed auditorium, addressing a group of young entrepreneurs at a conference. His talk wasn't about maximizing profits or scaling businesses. It was about balance, self-awareness, and the true meaning of success. "When I was younger, I thought success meant having it all. The big house, the fancy cars, and the recognition," David said, his voice steady. "But it wasn't until I lost everything that I realized what truly matters. Love, connection, and living with purpose." He spoke candidly about his past, his failures, and the lessons he had learned along the way. The audience hung on his every word, inspired by his vulnerability and wisdom. After the event, a young woman approached him, her eyes shining with admiration. "Your story gives me hope," she said. "It's a reminder that it's never too late to start over." David smiled. "It's never too late," he replied, "and the best chapters are often the ones we least expect." At home that evening, David found Claire sitting in their garden, sipping tea under the soft glow of string lights. He joined her, taking her hand in his. "You were incredible today," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. David chuckled. "I had a good editor," he teased, referring to Claire's feedback on his speech. Their life wasn't without challenges. There were still moments of doubt and difficulty, but they faced them together as partners. Claire's presence was a constant reminder of the second chance he had been given, and David never took it for granted. Reflecting on his journey, David realized how much he had grown. The man he was today bore little resemblance to the ambitious but disconnected person he had been years ago. Through heartbreak, he had found clarity. Through loss, he had found love, not just with Claire, but with himself. The biggest lesson David had learned was that happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you cultivate. It's found in the quiet moments, the shared laughter, and the courage to live authentically. As he and Claire sat under the stars, David felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the struggles that had shaped him, the love that had healed him, and the life they were building together. He squeezed Claire's hand and smiled. The best is yet to come. David's journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Life has a way of breaking us down, only to rebuild us stronger, wiser, and more open to the possibilities that lie ahead. As you reflect on his story, ask yourself, what would you do if everything you thought you needed suddenly disappeared? Would you have the courage to rebuild, to seek something deeper and more meaningful? Remember, life isn't about the things you accumulate or the titles you earn. It's about the relationships you nurture, the lessons you learn, and the moments that take your breath away. The road to happiness isn't always easy, but it's worth every step. Embrace the journey, trust the process, and know that your greatest chapter may still be unwritten.